agent, every speech he makes has to be cleared word for word with the Central Intelligence Agency before he gives it. And then he went on to brag about the fact that not a word of anyone he's ever given had been changed. My guess is you're not saying much. I doubt I could clear this one with the agency. From about the 12th word on, it would be blank spaces. So I think that somebody walking out of the CIA and talking is about as likely as somebody walking out of the mafia and talking. I think either these people are so low on need to know they didn't know anything anyway and they can't tell you much, and so let them talk, or they represent a factional fight within the agency where one section of the agency is covering their rear end so that they can spill the beans on the other section, or they're directly planted by the agency as damage control. And when they know that the researchers or other events are going to break a story in the news, they put those people out as the experts on the story so that the real researchers will never be heard, and they'll get the books and the publicity in the press. And there are many examples of this in the Kennedy case. Probably the worst one that I believe is Mark Lane, but there are many other researchers that serve this loyal critic function and never tell you who did it. And so then they both control the information and they serve as a collection of information about who's interested when they go out. Or the next level is that they really are an intelligence agent that knew something, who really did have the courage to come out and speak about it. And in those cases, they don't get lectures; they get a bullet in the head. And that's happened on enough instances. But I'd say give them a forum. If somebody defected from a guard job at Auschwitz, I would give them a forum in Germany to talk about what they were doing, but I wouldn't invite them in to the resistance meeting in the Warsaw Ghetto, and I wouldn't make them into a hero just because they spoke up. But I'd give them a forum, but I think that we play a very dangerous game by feeling that we're finally going to have credibility because somebody from the system is going to take up our point of view and say a few things on our behalf. And I think we ought to realize that our best credibility is ourselves, and that our best chance of getting to the truth is not from somebody who's formerly employee of the same agencies that continue to oppress us. People break ranks, and that's admirable, and some people blow the whistle, and that's good, and get the information out, but I think that we need to listen more to the people at the bottom of the pile and give them the credibility. And I certainly don't think we should be paying any lecture fees to ex-intelligence agents. I think they owe us money. I don't worry about being killed. They can kill you from a satellite. They can kill you from the length of a football field with a little flechette. They can kill you by slipping something into your water supply. I mean, there's too many ways that they can kill you. You can't decide how you're going to die, only how you're going to live. You have to take a reasonable level of precaution. But in the end, as I said last night also, I think we're all dead already, at least as far as how much we're conscious of and have power to strike back against this system. If we remain in the kind of apathy and disempowerment that they've taught us to live under, the cynicism that they've taught us to accept instead of social change and activism, and we don't stand up to them, then we're just going to die quietly, which is what they want us to do. And I think we can back them off, I can expose them. I think individuals and groups can do a great deal to change things. But you get to a certain point, if I lived in Nazi Germany and I found out about the camps and I found out about the soap, then you get to a certain point where you're going to decide, well, it's not worth my effort, it's not me they're coming after, I'm just going to go home, take a shower and use the soap and wash my hands of it. Or you can say no. And to me, it's a moral imperative at a certain point. If you have any personal integrity, if you have any moral consciousness, you realize a certain amount of truth about these things, and you can't turn around, you can't go back, you can't go take up the good life and live the privilege and live the lie, because the lie's gone for you. At that point, I think you have to, regardless of the consequences, even if it means that I might get killed for speaking out, go ahead and speak out, because it's the only thing to do. What the hell does it mean that they kill me? Do you know how many people they kill every day? In the third world, in my name, and supposedly you know, with my sanction, if I keep silent, what on earth does one death of one person in the United States mean? What would the death of one German who cooperated with the fascist regime mean? What's it worth? I mean, if we're here for some purpose, it seems to me, it's to figure out who and where we are and take back our lives and get at that truth. And, you know, there'll probably, unfortunately, be more comment about my death if I ever do die than there'll be about the hundreds of people that were killed at Jonestown. And these were predominantly black people, which was never discussed, about the millions of African people currently dying of AIDS and dying of cholera. Tremendous level of death all around the world, both intentional and through the forced starvation and the exploitation of labor and the near slavery conditions. But those deaths don't bother us much. I mean, most of us go on with our lives and don't think about them. But we're part and party to genocide in these current systems, and we have to speak up, it seems to me, even if there's some cost to us. So if what they want to do is kill me, it's fair game. I don't want to kill them. I want to bring them back their human consciousness and give them some chance at seeing again what real human existence and communication is. My favorite dream, and it's a dream, a very powerful dream I had, and I'd like to write a book about it, is one in which I'm pursuing one of these Nazis with a group of people. It's set in England in the 1890s, and the gaslight running down these brick alleys, and the Nazis like sort of like Jekyll, you know, with the little top cap and the cape. He comes to the back gate of the house where he's got to go in, and he hasn't got time to fumble out the key and get in before we catch up with him, and he turns terrified toward us, and instead of a face, he has a skull, because his human face is gone. And instead of a weapon, I pull out a little pouch and open it up and hold the flesh of his human face back up to him. That's my dream vision. And I don't like Nazis or fascists one single bit, but I know what human existence is worth. I know who we are at the deepest level. And I know what we have to offer each other, even if we haven't committed those sorts of crimes. And I exist in a society that most of my life has totally ignored the worth of the people around me. And I just feel that it's my responsibility, duty bound, to reverse that direction. Deals with Nazi intelligence to come into the United States, part and parcel of the whole intelligence structure, and just recently fired within the last couple of years by Kennedy before the killing for his lies concerning the Bay of Pigs operation. John J. McCloy, a Rockefeller banking lawyer, part of the Rockefeller firm Sullivan and Cromwell, which refused even after the Jewish pogroms began in Nazi Germany to withdraw their German banking accounts. Finally, the German partners in the law firm rebelled, and they were forced to withdraw, although McCloy opposed it to the bitter end. A Native American fascist called the Godfather of the American Establishment, Undersecretary of War during World War II, opposed bombing even the rail lines going into the Nazi concentration camps, much less the camps themselves, would not help with the international immigration of Jews or other things that were put forward by the Jewish community to save lives during the war. In fact, worked with Earl Warren at the beginning of the war to establish concentration camps in the United States for Japanese Americans, and that he still was totally unrepentant for until his death, and felt that he had good reason to do, and never would apologize for it. He was given a medal for his services after the war in Germany on Reagan's White House lawn during the time when Reagan was visiting Bitburg and courting the Nazi SS, who he also had extensive historical ties to. But John J. McCloy specifically was the civilian leader of the German government following Lucius Clay's military rule there until a new German government could come in. And in that position had pardoned many of these key Nazis that figure into the circles that helped to kill John Kennedy. John Sherman Cooper had been an ambassador to Germany in the Galen and post-war period, and he sat on the commission. Gerald Ford sat there, who obviously has enough brains to follow orders, if not to walk straight, but he knew enough to lie about the Warren Commission and to go about things, and he had enough power, if not sense, to say to the commission, I can take care of UPI and AP, and they did, and the American press, even before the commission report could be read, were saying it was the most thorough thing ever, and of course Gerald Ford got out of this presidency in the United States for a period of time, although he himself was shot at in certain assassination attempts, but he got to be appointed when the Rockefellers and others came in to power for a period of time, and he in turn helped put Bush in power in the CIA. Earl Warren himself, who had worked on these concentration camp things, had gotten his reputation as a gangbuster in California for going after elements of the mob. It was essentially a phony operation. In 1948, when the CIA was formed and the military-industrial complex wanted to run a candidate to take care of its interests, the person they put forward was Thomas Dewey. And Dewey also had this phony reputation as the underworld fighter for putting Lucky Luciano in prison. Never mind that he let Luciano out of prison years later for all the services he did for Navy intelligence during the war, like putting General Patton in touch with Don Caligaro Vizzini, the head of the Sicilian Mafia, so that he could land in Sicily and cross hundreds of miles. Kefauver held a congressional hearing trying to figure this out. How did Patton's Third Army go so fast into Italy and go across the mountains and then establish themselves down the cities in Palermo and turn the course of the war? And part of it was that they had direct collaboration with the Sicilian Mafia, kicked out by Mussolini and living up in the hills, who welcomed him into the villages with the head Don of the mafiosi there sitting in the tank with Patton. And I don't think it's any coincidence then, from then on, that the Third Army was called Lucky Forward. I think it was Lucky Luciano Forward, and Mr. Dewey made sure that Luciano got released. He allowed elements like Marlansky and other mobsters to visit him in prison during the war to help establish international heroin traffic, and Navy intelligence played a key role in that situation. Dewey ran in 1948 on this CIA Mafia ticket. His campaign manager was none other than Allen Dulles, and his vice president, should he have been elected, he lost to Truman, even though the CIA got the Chicago Tribune to print that Dewey wins. The election went the other way, surprisingly enough for them. Then they compromised Truman and got him to sign the National Security Act, and that was it. But had he won, his vice president would have been Earl Warren, who I believe was in the pocket of these people from the day he began his political career, and was compromised by them. He apparently balked at being on the Warren Commission and was brought into LBJ's office, and Johnson ordered him by military order, saying he was still an officer of the U.S. military, to take on this job, even if he didn't want to go public in this cover-up. And Warren and these others made sure that there was no dissent from the few other members of the committee that did ask real questions, and eventually ended up not believing the final conclusion, including Senator Richard Russell and Hale Boggs. Boggs died in a strange crash in an airplane in the Watergate years, disappeared in Alaska, and his staff were sent a satellite photo of the plane going down into the Alaskan snow just to let them know that he was taken care of. But it was Boggs who wanted a footnote put in at the point in the Warren Commission report that said that Oswald was a lone assassin, that Boggs didn't necessarily agree with that opinion, and Warren pounded his fist and said, gentlemen, we have to have unanimity on this point, and threatened them that if they didn't go the lone nut route, then what would come out was that the Soviet Union had done it and we'd be involved in World War III. And so this was a scare tactic that was used to shut them up. But the main elements running the Warren Commission were tied throughout their political lives and afterwards to the same people that organized the killing. And as I mentioned last night in the lecture, the Warren report itself wasn't even put together by one of the staff. Besides having CIA secretaries work there to transcribe, the meeting where the lawyers were chosen for the Warren Commission was totally secret and is still in the National Archives, the minutes from that meeting. Well, if this wasn't a national security matter, what's the secrecy? But it's because they picked certain lawyers like Mr. Arlen Specter, who now sits in the Senate, in Pennsylvania, who was the one that developed the magic bullet theory that you were all laughing about tonight. He came up with that for the commission in order to explain it. I used to live in Pennsylvania, and I'd sign petitions to him. I always addressed them single bullet Spectre. And continues to lie about the situation to this day. But these lawyers were handpicked in order to ask the wrong questions of the witnesses, or just ignore the testimony, or go in the wrong direction, or go off record if they needed to, so that the case couldn't be solved. And in addition to all those people and the phony committees that were set up to solve the assassination, these different groups, the ballistics group, which started out, its first 3 files were shot 1, shot 2, shot 3. Even before they had a piece of evidence to put in the file, they knew how many bullets they were going to go with. And the other groups to study Oswald's life, you know, and they studied that in great detail. But none of them really looked at the evidence, the hard evidence in Dealey Plaza, or really tried to solve the case. But just in case all those committees, totally compromised, didn't come up with the right conclusion, they didn't even let any of them write the Warren Commission report. They brought in, on technical duty transfer, someone working at the Pentagon with the Army Historical Division, which was the drop point for the whole Galen network, an individual by the name of Otto Winokur. And Mr. Winokur is the person who gave us this lie in its greatest detail. Even in the memos that I read, line by line, the groups that investigated it for the Warren Commission criticized the report, saying that there was no basis for the conclusions that Winokur was making, except that they were to be the official state lie, and they knew it even internally. But all that was ignored, and the report was put out. And Winokur came here doing this tremendous service for our historical division, helping to write the history of World War II. His qualification is that he had been one of 26 official historians for Adolf Hitler, and one of the liars that helped to build the Third Reich. So I believe that Jim Garrison was on the right track, which is why he had to be compromised and the witnesses killed, because he went after the people that were central to the Permindex defense intelligence, military and industrial complex, and international fascist networks that wiped out John Kennedy and eventually Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and hundreds of other minor political figures and witnesses, people that could speak out right up to the current period with the assassinations of John Lennon and many others. And maybe in the question and answer period you want to ask me about your favorite assassination, we could talk about that. There's also a Canadian connection in the Martin Luther King case, because when James Earl Ray was allowed to escape from prison, he moved out of Memphis after the shooting into Atlanta and took a bus up here to Toronto, and according to him, opened a phone book and picked 3 aliases in one of the suburbs here to use while he traveled around Canada and to hide himself. He had not been responsible for shooting Martin Luther King. He had been moved into Memphis by intelligence agents that manipulated him and set him up. He was not in the rooming house at the time of the shooting. He was out at a gas station, was seen there changing a tire. When he went back to go to the rooming house, he saw the police and took off in the Mustang the other direction, having had a long criminal history and enough street smarts to know not to show up when there's too many police hanging around. And so he took off and then heard on the radio that a white man in a white Mustang was being chased in regard with the assassination. Even had he been in the rooming house, he wouldn't have been able to shoot Martin Luther King. The shot that hit King came from directly across the street above a retaining wall and some bushes, backyard area of the house, and was fired, I believe, by an individual by the name of Jack Armstrong, who figures in also to the Kennedy assassination and other operations later on. But when Ray came up and picked these random names out of the phone book, it just so happened that the people he picked all had physical resemblances to him. One to the level that the scars on his nose from a plastic surgery similar to one that Ray had, scar on his forehead, and other things matched identically. And this was Ernst Stavro Gall, who himself was willing to do intelligence work, and who had relatives in South Africa who were hard killers and mercenary there. And so there's more evidence over the years that continues to break on each of these assassinations. We get a little closer to the truth. The stories go on, but what I found in my work was that the same individuals, the same teams, the same lawyers, the same autopsy people, the same even the same undertakers would show up. I talked to somebody in Virginia, in Arlington, a young girl whose father had been responsible for doing the embalming on John F. Kennedy's body. Now that got to be an important person because hardly anybody saw Kennedy's body, and anybody that did has something to tell. And many people saw Kennedy's body after the wounds is dead, and somebody saw at the level of actually embalming the body and fixing it up as an undertaker is important. And she said, my father has embalmed a lot of important people. And I said, well, who else? And she said, well, Howard Hughes. Well, now, don't they have any undertakers in Texas? Do they have to go to Arlington, Virginia to get the guy that did John F. Kennedy to come out and do Howard? Or is it just that he does such good work? Or is it that the same psychiatrists and lawyers and cover-up experts and operatives move? That's only one. I mean, I could give you 15 examples like that of people that show up over and over again in these operations and that compromise the operations. Like I mentioned last night, the most trusted man in America who broke Watergate and saved Nixon, who broke Koreagate and saved the CIA, Mr. Leon Jaworski, who worked at Nuremberg, undermined the prosecution of the Nazis, worked for the International Red Cross Rescue Division, which moved the Nazis out around the world with phony ID, and worked for CIA Kaplan Fund, and then was chosen as the liaison between the Warren Commission and the Texas State Police so that no local investigation would compromise the lie. It was illegal in the state of Texas at that time to take the body of John F. Kennedy back to Bethesda Naval Hospital. Totally illegal. There should have been a Texas state inquest of the body right at that point. It was Secret Service agents, FBI, that physically forced their way out of the hospital with the body, claiming that Jackie wanted him to go back, put it on the plane and flew back with somebody. The reports now that we've finally gotten by interviewing the people there was that they were already working on Kennedy when this other casket arrives with Jackie. So they were working on the body, probably that you see in these autopsy photographs, that was doctored up. You can go and shoot somebody else the right way so that the Mannlicher thing works and put them on the slab and take Kennedy's body down to the embalmer and put it under the eternal flame. But the point is that this was the president of what was supposed to be a democracy, and we haven't had an election in that country since that's meant a single thing. We've been able to develop any significant political leadership in that country that doesn't go along with the fascist agenda, because they're in danger of being treated the same way John F. Kennedy was. And so that's my answer to who done it.